My phone buzzed in the middle of algebra class. I glanced at the screen, expecting another random text from my best friend, but it was my mom calling. That was strange. She never called during school hours. I slid my phone under the desk and answered in a whisper. "Mom?" Her voice was low and shaking. "Don't say anything. He's in the room with you." I froze. My fingers went cold. My heart thumped so loud I could barely hear her next words. "Stay calm, Sam. Just listen to me. Don't move, don't react, and don't hang up." I looked around the classroom, trying not to make it obvious. My classmates were focused on their notebooks. The only sound was the clicking of pens and the hum of the ceiling fan. At the front of the room stood Mr. Coleman, our new substitute teacher. He was writing on the board, his voice calm, as he explained an equation. I whispered, "Mom, what are you talking about?" But she didn't answer. The call ended. I sat completely still, gripping my phone under the desk, trying to keep my breathing steady. My mom's voice repeated in my head, "He's in the room with you." That was the moment everything changed. If you want to know what happened next and how my mom's call changed everything, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I promise, the next part will shock you. My name is Samantha Reyes, but everyone calls me Sam. I'm 17, a senior in high school, and up until that day, my life was normal. I lived with my mom, Laura, in a small, quiet town where nothing big ever happened. She's a nurse who works long night shifts, and since my dad passed away a few years ago, she's been both my parent and my best friend. She worries too much, but I've always brushed it off as just her being careful. That morning started like any other. She made me scrambled eggs, told me to wear my jacket because it might rain, and reminded me to text her when school ended. Before I left, she hugged me longer than usual. I didn't think much of it. I just laughed and said, "Mom, I'll be fine. It's school, not war." She smiled but didn't answer. I noticed her eyes lingered on me for a moment, like she wanted to say something else but decided not to. At school, everything felt routine. My best friend, Olivia, saved me a seat near the back of the classroom. She was already teasing me about our math teacher. "I swear, Mr. Coleman is way too nice. No real teacher smiles that much," she said with a smirk. I laughed. "You're paranoid. He's just new." Mr. Coleman had joined the school 2 weeks earlier, replacing our regular teacher, who was out sick. He seemed harmless. He dressed neatly, spoke softly, and always had a polite tone. But now that I think about it, there were small things that didn't fit. How he remembered everyone's names too quickly, how his questions sometimes felt too personal, and how he always watched people a second longer than necessary. When I told my mom about him once, she frowned. "Be careful around new people, Sam. Some people hide who they really are." I rolled my eyes at the time. I didn't see any danger in a man who taught math and handed out extra credit for participation. That Wednesday started out calm. The hallway smelled like pencil shavings and hand sanitizer. The morning announcements were boring as usual. Mr. Coleman greeted us with his friendly voice and told us to open our textbooks to chapter 6. The air was still, almost peaceful. No one had any idea what was about to happen. We were halfway through class when I felt my phone vibrate. Normally, I would have ignored it, but when I saw my mom's name, something in my stomach tightened. She never called me at school, ever. I slid my hand under the desk and picked up. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Don't say anything, Sam. He's in the room with you." At first, I didn't understand. "Mom, what?" "Don't look around. Don't speak. Just stay calm. I'm calling the school." The connection crackled, then went dead. I stared at the phone, frozen. My throat went dry. I didn't dare move my head, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mr. Coleman glance in my direction. Our eyes met for half a second, and something about his expression made my stomach twist. It wasn't anger. It was recognition, like he already knew. My mind raced. Why would my mom say that? What did she know that I didn't? I could feel Olivia nudging my arm, whispering, "What's wrong?" But I couldn't answer. Mr. Coleman set down the marker and started walking toward the back of the class, toward me. His steps were slow, deliberate. My pulse pounded so hard it hurt. I slipped my phone into my pocket and tried to act normal, but my hands were trembling. He stopped beside my desk, leaned slightly, and smiled. Everything okay, Sam? I nodded quickly. Yes, sir. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He just looked at me for a moment too long, then straightened up and walked back to the board. The rest of the class felt like an hour inside a nightmare. Every tick of the clock echoed in my ears. My mom's warning repeated in my mind. He's in the room with you. I didn't know what was going on, but one thing was certain. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a misunderstanding. Something about Mr. Coleman wasn't right. And somehow, my mom knew before anyone else did. The air in the classroom felt heavier than usual. Every second seemed to stretch longer than the one before it. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat as I stared at the whiteboard, pretending to take notes. But I wasn't hearing a single word. My mom's warning kept playing in my head. He's in the room with you. What did she mean? Who was she talking about? And why would she sound that terrified? Mr. Coleman kept teaching, his voice steady, but something about the way he moved didn't feel right anymore. Every time he turned, I flinched. Every time he looked at the class, I felt his eyes linger on me a little too long. My classmates were clueless, laughing quietly or whispering jokes to each other. Only Olivia noticed that something was wrong. She leaned toward me. Hey, are you okay? She whispered. I forced a smile. Yeah, just not feeling great. But my hands were shaking under the desk. My phone was still in my pocket, but it was off. I wanted to text my mom, to ask her what was happening, but Mr. Coleman had made it clear that no one was allowed to use their phones. I remembered how he had taken mine earlier in the week when I tried to text during class. Phones are a distraction, he said with a half smile, placing it on his desk until the bell rang. At the time, I thought he was just strict. Now it felt like something darker. He walked between the rows of desks, checking people's work. His footsteps echoed softly on the linoleum floor. I kept my eyes down, pretending to write, but when he stopped behind me, I froze. Good job, Sam, he said quietly, almost in a whisper meant just for me. You always pay attention. I nodded slightly, afraid to look up. I could smell the faint scent of his cologne, too close, too personal. Then, slowly, he moved on to the next row. My shoulders dropped slightly, but my heart wouldn't stop racing. The next 10 minutes felt endless. When the bell finally rang, I almost jumped out of my seat. The noise of students packing up broke the tension in the air, and I thought maybe I could just leave and figure out what was going on later. But before anyone could get up, Mr. Coleman spoke. Everyone, stay seated. I need to make an announcement before you go. The chatter died instantly. He walked to the door and pushed it closed. Then he reached for the small metal lock and turned it. The sound of it clicking made my stomach twist. Olivia frowned. Why'd he lock the door? She whispered. Mr. Coleman turned back to us with that same calm tone. There's been a small issue in the hallway. Just stay inside until the office tells us it's okay to leave. That might have sounded believable if it wasn't for the way he said it. Too smooth, too quick, like he had planned it. A few students exchanged uneasy looks. My palms were sweating. I couldn't take my eyes off him. He started talking again, but I wasn't listening. My mind was racing through every possible explanation. Was there really an emergency? Or was my mom right? Was I in danger? I looked at the windows. They were closed. The classroom door was locked. And my phone, the only way to contact her, was in my pocket, turned off. I had to do something, but I couldn't just panic. If my mom was right, I needed to stay smart. I whispered to Olivia, text my mom. Her number's in your phone. Tell her I'm in class, the door's locked, and something feels wrong. She blinked, confused. Sam, what are you talking about? Please, I whispered urgently. Just do it. Olivia nodded slowly and slid her phone under the desk, pretending to look at her notes. She started typing. Mr. Coleman continued talking, pacing near the board, but suddenly he stopped mid-sentence. His eyes narrowed. Phones away, he said sharply. Now. Olivia froze. Everyone looked around. My heart dropped. He began walking toward our side of the room. Hand it over, he said, his voice quieter now, but firmer. I spoke before she could. It's mine, I blurted. I was just checking the time. He stopped in front of my desk, studying me with a look that made my skin crawl. Checking the time? He repeated, or checking something else. The room went silent. He held out his hand. I pulled my phone from my pocket and placed it in his palm, my fingers trembling. He smiled faintly as if satisfied. "Thank you, Sam. I told you before. No distractions." He turned away, placing it on his desk again. My mind screamed for a way out. Olivia looked at me with wide eyes, mouthing, "What's going on?" I couldn't answer her. Outside the locked door, faint voices echoed, students laughing, lockers slamming, normal sounds of school life. But inside that room, it felt like a trap. Mr. Coleman started talking again, writing something on the board like nothing had happened. But then he stopped, slowly turned, and said, "You all are such good kids. I hope you know how lucky you are to have a teacher who cares." Something about the way he said teacher didn't sound right. It wasn't pride, it was control. I sat frozen, trying to hold myself together. I didn't know what he was planning or what my mom had discovered, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to find a way to get help before that door stayed locked for good. My heart pounded harder, and I whispered to myself, "Stay calm. Think. Don't let him see you're scared." But fear had already taken hold. Every second that passed, I could feel the danger closing in. The classroom felt like a cage. Every eye in the room was darting nervously between Mr. Coleman and the locked door. The sound of his chalk scratching the board was the only thing breaking the silence. I kept replaying my mom's voice in my head, her shaky whisper, her warning that he was in the room with me. I didn't know what she had found out, but I knew one thing now. This man wasn't a teacher. He was something else. And if I didn't act soon, something terrible was going to happen. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to stay still. He was watching us closely. Every time someone shifted in their seat, he glanced over his shoulder, his jaw tightening. I could tell he knew something was off. Olivia sat beside me, trying to look calm, but I saw her hand trembling on her desk. I had to think. My mom had said she was calling the school. Maybe help was already on the way. But what if she hadn't reached anyone yet? What if no one believed her? The office might think she was overreacting. I couldn't wait for help that might not come. Mr. Coleman turned around and leaned against his desk, folding his arms. "You're all so quiet today," he said with a faint smile. "It's almost unsettling." No one laughed. The room stayed silent. His smile faded. "You know," he continued, "I've been at a lot of schools. Most students talk too much. You kids, you listen. I like that." There was something in his tone, too personal, too aware. It made my skin crawl. He reached for the water bottle on his desk, took a slow sip, and then looked right at me. "Sam, why don't you read the next question on the board?" My mouth went dry. Sure." I stood up slowly, picking up my textbook to cover my shaking hands. My voice cracked slightly as I began reading, but I didn't get far. "Louder," he said sharply. "Everyone should hear you." My heart pounded, but I kept reading, pretending to stay calm. As I spoke, I glanced toward the back of the classroom, where the old supply closet door stood slightly open. It was small, but I could see that it had an emergency exit behind it, one of those push-bar doors that led outside. My pulse quickened. That could be my way out. When I finished reading, he smiled faintly. "Good. You've got a nice voice." I sat down quickly, feeling sick. Olivia leaned toward me and whispered, "We need to get out of here." "I know," I whispered back, "but we can't just run." He locked the door. Olivia's eyes darted toward the windows. "They open." "They don't. They're sealed." We both fell silent when Mr. Coleman stood again. He began walking down the rows slowly, talking in that calm, teacher-like tone. But his words didn't match his movements. He wasn't looking at the students' work anymore. He was looking at us, watching, studying. When he reached the back of the room, he stopped near the supply closet. He pushed the door closed and turned the lock at the top. My chest tightened. He had noticed it too. I needed to create a distraction, something to break his focus long enough for someone to escape or signal for help. My eyes flicked toward the clock. Only 10 minutes left before the next class. If we could just hold out until then, someone would come to the door. But then I saw him reach into his jacket pocket. My breath caught. He pulled out something small, shiny, metallic. For a second, I thought it was just a key. But then I saw the glint of a small folding knife. He didn't open it, but he held it loosely, turning it in his fingers like it was nothing. Panic surged through me. He was armed. I looked at Olivia, and she gave me the smallest nod. She understood. If I didn't act now, none of us might get out. I raised my hand. Mr. Coleman, can I please go to the nurse? I don't feel well. He tilted his head. You already said that earlier, didn't you? Yes, but I really don't feel right, I said, clutching my stomach. Please. He studied me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Fine, he said finally, but I'll walk you there. My stomach dropped. That was worse than a no. He walked toward the door, unlocking it with one hand. The hallway outside was empty and quiet. My chance was slipping away, but then Olivia spoke up. Mr. Coleman? She said quickly. Can you check my work before you go? I think I did this problem wrong. He stopped and turned slightly. Really? You can't wait? It's for extra credit, she said, forcing a smile. He frowned, annoyed, but started walking back toward her desk. That was it. That was the distraction. As he turned his back, I stood up quietly and moved toward the door. My legs felt like they were made of lead, but I kept going. The moment I reached the door, I turned the handle, praying it wouldn't make noise. It clicked softly. I stepped into the hallway and looked around. Empty. Then I sprinted. My shoes squeaked on the tile as I ran straight toward the main office. Behind me, I heard a shout. His voice, furious and echoing. Sam, stop! But I didn't look back. I reached the office door, burst through and yelled, Call the police, please. He's not a teacher. The secretary's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Before I could answer, the sound of running footsteps came from down the hall. I turned and saw him approaching fast, his face twisted with anger. But within seconds, 2 security officers appeared from the opposite direction, shouting for him to stop. He froze, eyes darting around like a trapped animal. Then, without another word, he dropped the knife and raised his hands. The moment felt like forever, but it was over in seconds. The officers restrained him as one of them radioed for backup. I stood shaking, barely able to breathe. When my mom came rushing into the building minutes later, tears streaming down her face, she wrapped her arms around me and whispered, I told you not to move. You listened. You're safe now. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt her hand on my back. All I could say was, You saved me, Mom. And for the first time since that call, I finally let myself breathe. The hallway outside my classroom was filled with shouting and chaos. Students peeked through doors, confused, not yet understanding what was happening. I stood frozen near the office door, my chest tight, heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. 2 security officers had pinned Mr. Coleman against the wall, shouting for him to stay still. His face, which used to wear that calm, almost polite expression, was now twisted into something dark and furious. His voice was cold, his tone sharp. You don't know what you're doing, he snarled at the guards. You've got the wrong man. But I knew they didn't. His voice wasn't that of an innocent person. It was the same, smooth voice that had sent chills down my spine during class, the same tone that hid behind a fake smile and polite words. The knife he had dropped on the floor gleamed under the fluorescent lights, proof that he was no teacher. He was something much worse. Get her out of here, one of the officers shouted. The secretary grabbed my arm gently and guided me into the front office, locking the door behind us. I could still see everything through the glass window. The officers had him restrained, but his eyes kept darting around, scanning for a way to escape. For a second, his gaze locked with mine. The look in his eyes was something I'll never forget. Cold, calculating, like he was memorizing my face. Then the sirens began. The faint sound of police cars grew louder as they pulled up outside the school. Teachers hurried into the hallway, trying to keep students calm, but no one really was. Whispers spread fast. What's going on? Did someone get hurt? Why are the cops here? Through the noise, I heard my name, my mom's voice. She ran into the office, her face pale, her hands shaking. Sam! She wrapped her arms around me so tightly I could barely breathe, but I didn't care. For the first time, I felt safe. She kept whispering, You're okay, like she needed to convince herself. The police officers came into the office moments later. One of them spoke calmly. Ma'am, we've identified the suspect. His real name isn't Coleman. It's Ethan Miles. He's been on the run for 3 weeks. I felt the blood drain from my face. On the run? For what? The officer hesitated. He was wanted in connection with 2 home invasions and an attempted kidnapping in another district. My mom tightened her grip on my shoulder. I knew it, she said under her breath. I saw his name in a message at the hospital this morning. A patient came in who was attacked by him. When I realized the name matched your new teacher's name, I called the school, but no one picked up. That's why I called you. Her voice cracked when she added, I didn't think I'd be in time. The officer nodded. You saved her, ma'am. If she hadn't acted when she did, it could have gone much worse. My legs felt weak. Everything that had happened in the last hour hit me all at once. The phone call, the locked door, the knife, the sprint down the hallway. I sat down, shaking. My mom knelt in front of me, brushing my hair from my face. You did everything right, sweetheart. You stayed calm. You listened. I'm so proud of you. Outside, through the office window, I saw the police leading him away in handcuffs. He didn't resist anymore. He just stared straight ahead, his expression empty. The flashing red and blue lights painted the walls, reflecting off his face as they pushed him into the police car. Students gathered near the windows, whispering, filming, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. I caught a glimpse of Olivia among them, tears streaking her face as she spotted me in the office. She mouthed, Are you okay? I nodded weakly, and she smiled through her tears. One of the detectives came in to talk to me. He spoke gently, asking what I saw, what he said, how long he'd been teaching. I answered as best as I could, though my voice kept shaking. He listened carefully and then said, You were very brave today. Because you stayed calm, we were able to get to him before anyone got hurt. That word, brave, didn't feel right. I hadn't felt brave. I had felt terrified. Every choice I made came from instinct, not courage. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to survive. When the questioning was over, my mom and I walked outside. The cool air hit my face, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. The crowd outside had thinned, but a few people were still standing by the gate, watching the police cars drive away. My mom squeezed my hand. You never think something like this could happen at your school, she said softly. I know, I whispered. He seemed so normal. She nodded, eyes fixed on the road where the cars disappeared. That's the scariest part. People like that always seem normal. We sat in the car for a long moment before driving home. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt strange. Not heavy, just tired. When we finally pulled into our driveway, she turned to me and said, You remember what I always told you? Trust your instincts. They'll never lie to you. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face again. That empty stare. But underneath the fear, I also felt something new. Gratitude. My mom's call had saved me. Her voice, the one I had almost ignored, had been the difference between safety and something far worse. Before I went to bed, I texted Olivia, Thanks for what you did today. You're the best friend ever. She replied almost instantly, I thought I lost you for a second. Don't scare me like that again. I smiled for the first time all day. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, I realized that sometimes danger doesn't look like danger. It hides behind politeness, behind smiles, behind everyday moments we take for granted. But one instinct, one warning, one phone call can change everything. That night, I finally sent my mom one last text before turning off the lights. You were right. I listened. I love you. And for the first time since that awful moment in class, I slept peacefully, knowing I had made it out alive. The next few days passed in a haze. The police came by our house several times for follow-up questions. Reporters showed up at the school, asking students for comments. My phone filled with messages from classmates, teachers, and even people I barely knew. Everyone wanted to talk about what had happened in that classroom, the locked door, the phone call, the knife, and the arrest. But I didn't want to talk about it. Every time someone brought it up, my chest tightened, and I felt that same wave of fear wash over me again. I stayed home for 3 days before going back to school. My mom insisted I rest, and the school counselor called to check on me. You don't have to rush back, she said kindly, but part of me wanted to face it, to see the classroom again, to remind myself that I survived it. When I finally walked through the school doors, everything looked the same, but somehow felt different. The smell of pencil shavings, the laughter in the hallway, even the morning announcements, all of it felt a little distant, like I was watching life happen through a window. Students whispered when I passed by. Some looked at me with pity, others with awe. Olivia ran up to me the second she saw me and threw her arms around my shoulders. "Sam, you're back," she said, holding on tightly. "I've been waiting all week to see you." I smiled, though it felt weak. "I missed you too." We walked to class together, and my stomach flipped when I saw the door, the same one that had once been locked, trapping us all inside. The school had replaced the lock, and there was a new substitute teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Foster. She greeted me with a warm smile. "You must be Samantha," she said softly. "I'm glad you're here." For a moment, I stood in the doorway, remembering everything, his voice, the knife glinting on the floor, my mom's whisper through the phone. Then I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The fear was still there, but I wasn't letting it control me anymore. The class was quieter than usual. Everyone treated me differently, like I was fragile, but I wasn't fragile. I was just changed. When Mrs. Foster began the lesson, I caught myself glancing at the door, listening for sounds outside. My nerves weren't gone, but I was learning to manage them. During lunch, Olivia and I sat under our usual tree outside. She looked at me carefully and said, "You know, everyone's calling you a hero." I shook my head. "I'm not a hero. I was just lucky my mom called when she did." She frowned. "You could have frozen. You didn't. You did something. That counts for something." Her words stuck with me. For so long, I'd been replaying that day, wondering what I could have done differently, how close I had come to danger. But she was right. I hadn't frozen. I had listened to my instincts and trusted my mom's warning. That was what saved me. That afternoon, the principal asked me to stop by his office. He thanked me for my composure and handed me a letter from the local police department. It was short but powerful. It said that my quick thinking helped prevent a tragedy, and that my calm response allowed officers to arrive in time. I didn't feel proud when I read it, just thankful. Thankful that everyone was safe. Thankful that my mom had trusted her gut. Thankful that I still got to come home that night. At home, things slowly returned to normal. My mom was still jumpy whenever my phone rang, and she double-checked the locks every night, but she smiled more often. She even started leaving work on time again. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me quietly, and she'd say, "You're stronger than you think, Sam." One evening, we sat together on the porch watching the sunset. The air was cool, and the world felt calm for the first time in weeks. I turned to her and said, "Mom, how did you know? How did you know he was dangerous?" She sighed. "I didn't at first, but when I saw that alert with his name, something inside me just knew. A mother's instinct, maybe." I smiled. "I guess instincts run in the family." She laughed softly and put her arm around me. "Next time, though, I'd rather your instincts kick in for something boring, like passing a math test." That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time since the incident. I wrote about fear, courage, and how one phone call changed everything. I realized that sometimes the scariest moments show us who we really are. I wasn't fearless, far from it, but I learned that bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about acting, even when you are. Weeks later, the news reported that Ethan Miles was facing several charges and would likely go to prison for a long time. Hearing his name one last time gave me closure. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done letting that fear live rent-free in my mind. When life finally started feeling normal again, I decided to share my story online. Not for attention, but for awareness. I wanted people to know that danger doesn't always come with warning signs, and that listening to your gut, or to someone who loves you, can truly save your life. Looking back, I see that moment in class as a turning point in my life. I learned how quickly everything can change, how important it is to stay aware, and how love and intuition can be stronger than fear. My mom's voice will always echo in my head, calm, firm, protective. the voice that told me to stay still and trust her. And I always will. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and comment where you're watching from. Your support reminds me that sharing these stories matters, because sometimes one voice, one story, or one warning can make all the difference.